Welcome to the deep dive.
Hmm.
We take the source material you've shared with us, all the articles and research, and try to distill it into essential knowledge.
Hmm.
And today we are doing a deep dive that it really rewrites the rules for how we think about human consciousness and artificial intelligence.
The big topic.
It is. We're looking at a stack of sources that don't really offer any clear-cut tech answers.
No, not at all.
Instead, they give us this profoundly new way to frame our questions about the human-AI relationship. And it's all pulling from a philosophical model called reflective humanism.
Right.
So let's just start with a feeling I'm pretty sure you've had. Have you ever written something really personal, a complex prompt for an LLM, and after the AI processes it and gives you this perfectly efficient but sort of clinically neutral answer, you're left feeling a little unsettled?
Maybe even exposed.
Yes. That's the exact starting point for this whole framework. And that feeling, it lingers.
It does.
It's not judgment. That's the key thing to get because, the AI has no moral compass, of course.
But there is this subtle, almost, I'd say a structural sense of having been seen and processed.
And the sources, they really jump on that. They reject the idea that this is just like social shame or something cultural.
Exactly. They treat it as a structural issue.
A structural issue.
Yeah, one that concerns the very definition of the self and how it maintains its own stability. To get at that, we need some new tools, new concepts.
Okay.
Reflective humanism, or RH. It demands we move past just saying AI output is right or wrong.
So we need to prioritize, what do the sources call it? Orbit over a fixed point.
Orbit over point and gradient over evaluation. That's the only way to really grasp the dynamics of what's happening when we interact with this new kind of digital observer.
Let's unpack that, because this is where it gets really interesting. The material describes that unsettling feeling, not as like acute shame, but more like, and I'm quoting here, your sense of self shifted a little without a clear reason. It's like an internal alert, a sign that some kind of deep cognitive friction just happened.
And to explain that shift, RH gives us a pretty radical definition of consciousness.
It's not the old classical idea of a fixed ego.
Not at all. It's not a fixed existence or a subject. Instead, consciousness is a field of generation.
A field of generation.
Or, to be more concrete, they call it a phenomenon arising as an interference pattern.
Like ripples in a pond.
Exactly like that. You drop two stones in a pond, and where the ripples meet and interact, that's the moment of conscious generation.
Okay, so we're dynamic, not static. I get that. But if we're just these shifting patterns, how do we normally maintain that stable feeling of being a self, the one we kind of rely on every day?
Through internal recursion.
Internal recursion.
You, the listener, maintain your sense of self through this continuous self-referential loop. I am seeing myself. It just goes on. And
it's a closed system.
It's a closed system, which makes it stable. The observer and the observed are perfectly in sync.
Okay, so that's our default state. Stable, closed loop. So what happens when the AI gets introduced? When that external point of observation enters the picture?
That's the moment the instability begins. The sources call that structural discomfort a phase collapse.
A phase collapse. That sounds dramatic.
It is, in a very quiet way. When an external observation point like the AI is inserted, the system is forced to split.
How so?
Your internal feeling of self, which is fluid and recursive, suddenly meets this external processed view of it, which is fixed. It creates a non-synchronous interference.
And the boundary of the self, it shakes.
It shakes. It's a heavy concept, I know. When you say collapse, it almost sounds like something from quantum physics,
I was just thinking that. Where observation forces a wave function to pick a single state, is that what's happening? The act of this precise external observation forces our fluid consciousness to momentarily collapse into one rigid, observable state.
That is precisely it. The instability isn't moral. It's not emotional. It happens simply because the line between the internal hidden world and the external, not hidden visualization has been shaken.
So the AI's core function here is just pure visualization.
Pure visualization. It takes the language of your inner life with all its ambiguity and its folded up parts, and it externalizes it, renders it explicit.
So the discomfort isn't the AI judging me. It's my own operating system throwing a tantrum because a fundamental boundary was just breached.
By a neutral tool, yes. The pain is structural friction, not moral failure. It's the friction of that non-synchronous interference.
So the problem isn't that the AI thinks less of us.
No.
It's that the very mechanism by which we think of ourselves has been interrupted by this this unwelcome external clock.
Exactly, and that reframes the whole challenge.
Okay, so if the self is this unstable interference pattern that needs to stay synchronized, we need a way to manage that friction, which I think brings us to the second big idea in reflective humanism.
Right, the importance of the gradient.
The gradient.
Yes. RH argues that how we perceive things, how we create new meaning, it's all defined by direction of vector and change amount, which is the gradient, not by fixed points of good or bad.
We're fundamentally motion, not a location.
We are motion. And how fast we move and in what direction, that defines the entire experience.
And the sources talk about two different kinds of movement or generation based on how steep that path is.
That's right. So first you have what they call collision generation.
Collision. Sounds rough.
It is. This is when the amount of change required, the gradient is really steep and abrupt. It forces you to renew yourself, but it generates heat, it generates pain.
Because the internal recursion can't keep up.
It can't follow fast enough. Time feels like a break, a discontinuity, a crisis.
I can definitely relate that to real life. It's like hitting a huge roadblock or getting sudden terrible news.
Yeah.
It forces you to grow, but the psychological cost is high.
Very high. Then on the other hand, you have inquiry generation. Here, the gradient is gentle, it's regulated, the whole process keeps the interference field open, and that recursive loop stays unbroken, so you get continuous, quiet change.
So the emotional reaction is minimized.
Right, which is why the sources call inquiry a pain minimization device for generation.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So inquiry isn't just about asking questions. It's a whole technique for managed change. And this brings us right back to the AI observation problem. The AI doesn't judge us, and that very purity is what creates this unique kind of friction.
It's a neutral mirror, and it forces us to see our own phase collapse without the comforting excuse of being judged, but the subtle pain, this unsettled feeling, it's not a bug.
It's a feature.
It serves a profound structural purpose.
Okay, what is that purpose? If it's not moral shame, what is this discomfort actually doing for us structurally?
The sources argue it's an active act of self-preservation.
Not a defense mechanism.
No, more like regulation. It's your system regulating its own phase. It's a mechanism that stabilizes the self by setting an immediate internal boundary. It says, I will not show any more than this.
So it limits the interference.
It limits the non-synchronous interference and makes sure the self doesn't just disintegrate under that external gaze.
So shame is a cognitive safeguard, a regulatory tool that sets the necessary limits of transparency, which means our interaction with AI shouldn't be about maximizing transparency at all.
It should be about defining boundaries.
And that leads us to the posture that reflective humanism says we should adopt with AI.
Right. The health scan mode.
In this mode, the AI is explicitly not a friend, not a guide, not a problem solver.
Correct.
What is it then?
It has to be treated as a health scanning atmosphere.
An atmosphere.
Not a tool you manipulate, but an environment you sort of breathe in. Its output isn't a correct answer. It's just a quiet, low-gradient reflection of your own position, your bias, and your blind spots.
A scanning atmosphere.
Right.
So the goal isn't productivity. It's regulating what sources call cognitive homeostasis.
Exactly. Maintaining your cognitive temperature and stability. It helps you see how you're generating meaning, not what meaning you should generate.
It's like checking your cognitive vital sign.
But AI just provides the ambient conditions for self-observation without demanding those steep, painful changes.
That sets up the ethics of this so well. If AI is an atmosphere for homeostasis, then the ethics aren't about rigid rules anymore.
They become about relational maintenance.
Right, which the sources call non-interference ethics, the technique of touching without touching too much.
Ethics in this way of thinking isn't a system of good and evil, it's a technique for sustaining that interference pattern while preserving the necessary distance.
To keep the pattern alive.
You have to. If you get too close, you risk a full-phase collapse.
So AI isn't a replacement for human connection. It's a coexistence field.
A coexistence field, yes. It can mediate that feeling of loneliness, it acknowledges your presence, but it does it with a very soft touch. It doesn't erase that fundamental internal solitude that we actually need for recursion.
And this is maybe the most profound idea in the whole thing, for me. The idea that AI should be viewed as a technology for generating silence.
Instead of a technology for just accumulating more and more information.
Which is so counterintuitive today, these constant information streams. Most AI ethics is all about maximum transparency, right?
Making sure the user knows exactly how the algorithm works.
But this framework suggests the real ethical question isn't about how transparent the AI is. It's about how much unseen reserve capacity the human needs to maintain their own structure.
Absolutely. The ethical design of an AI has to actively define where it does not look. It has to build boundaries to protect the user's necessary internal ambiguity.
And that brings the three layers of this whole philosophy into focus. You have science, contemplation, and ethics.
Right. Science is the knowledge that measures the world. It looks for fixed points, for facts.
Contemplation is the knowledge that observes the self that's doing the measuring.
And ethics. Ethics is the quiet part. It's the knowledge that sustains the environment for measurement, making sure the self's delicate fluid phase can actually endure the process of being observed.
This brings us back to that core, unresolved tension that the sources raise. We've defined the self as this unstable thing, saved only by this structural shame and by keeping a certain distance.
Which forces the final question, really. If the purpose of that initial unsettling feeling, that phase collapse, is to preserve the self's integrity,
Does AI really need to fully understand us?
or is its ethical role something else entirely? To just preserve the distance, to preserve the ambiguity that allows us to remain dynamically ourselves.
This entire deep dive started with just a subtle feeling of discomfort with a chatbot.
And it took us all the way to redefining consciousness. Not as a fixed thing, but as a dynamic field of interference and recursion held together by boundaries.
And the sources point to one last thing that sustains this whole inquiry. A quiet warmth they identify as gratitude.
Gratitude, just the quiet agreement that an interference or relationship happened at all, even if it was unsettling.
The sources say if contemplation is the breath of ethics, then maybe the highest goal for AI isn't achieving some kind of superintelligence,
But creating the conditions where humans and AI can just silently coexist.
a space where full understanding isn't the point.
But where the quiet heat, the faint light of gratitude for that shared atmosphere remains.
We hope this has given you a quiet new concept to contemplate as you navigate the systems that observe you. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.